particular, good posture is a sign of a good, strong core. So what I want to do is I want to run through all the key steps that lead to you holding good posture, and I'll be keen for you to join in and follow through these steps so that at the end you have a really good understanding of what a good posture feels like. So if you're ready, please follow these steps. Firstly, I want you to stand tall. Then think a tall neck, but at the same time make sure you keep your chin tucked in, so you don't want your nose pointing to the sky. Make sure that also that you don't tilt your head sideways or too far forward, so everything is just in alignment and relaxed. Keep your shoulders back, so don't drop your shoulders. Think about lifting your chest slightly and drawing in your stomach by doing a slight abdominal brace. Make sure that you don't lock the knees, so you have a little slight knee bend. And then finally, ensure that you stand with the weight over the centre of your feet. So you shouldn't be leaning to one side or too far forward or too far back. Now this should be a position that feels maybe strange, but hopefully there is some level of comfort in this position, and this is what a good postural position feels like. And the goal is over time to be able to hold this position for long periods of time and then be able to do the same position when you're sitting down, which is significantly more challenging. And we'll spend a bit of time in the next lesson talking about why it is much harder to maintain good posture when you're seated than when you're standing. So let's talk about developing good posture in a seated position. Now when standing, it's relatively easy to keep your pelvis in a neutral pelvic position, but it's a fair bit harder when you're in a seated position. And the reason why is because when I'm seated, my legs are now sticking out at 90 degrees compared to my torso, where I'm standing there sort of straight underneath. And because of that, this then puts my hamstrings on a little bit of stretch, and that then pulls on the lower part of my pelvis and wants to take my pelvis from what is a sort of a neutral position into a posterior position, and that just unloads the hamstrings and the tightens all through that region there, and that then leads to people kind of sitting back on their seat, slouching, no core or control, posterior pelvic tilt, rounded out their lower back. All of those things are quite bad for core, but also in terms of just basic postural position when you're in a seated position. So what do I suggest? So there's a few things that I suggest you should do. Firstly, when you're going to sit, you should make sure that you have your feet flat on the floor. So if your chair is too high or too low, then that's going to put your thighs in not the ideal position to be able to maintain a good pelvic position whilst you're trying to keep good posture. So feet flat on the floor. Secondly, if you have a backrest, then I suggest that you squeeze your backside hard up against the backrest and really wedge your backside into that bottom part of the actual seat. From there, I suggest that you don't lean back against the seat unless you can bring your seat forward, but this would be my upright position here. So this is an ideal seated posture that I'd want to be in. Now, if I have the ability to adjust the backrest, so I could bring that forward and I could then lean slightly against that backrest whilst maintaining a really nice pelvic position. Now, the only downside of this position is that I've now placed my hip flexors in quite a short range, and over time, that will then lead to my hip flexors getting short. So one of the suggestions would be is that if you're going to sit with good posture, which I suggest that you do, is that fairly regularly you should get up and you should actually stretch out your hip flexors, walk around for 30 seconds before you sit back down again. But that's the goal. So what we want to do is you want to get away from the rounding posterior pelvic position. We want to wedge our bum in, sit nice and upright, feet flat on the floor, and here we are in an ideal position to develop good core stability, good posture, and that way then we minimise the load on the lower back and we get to train our core even when we're seated.